Okay, a warm welcome to this ISDA webinar, which is named Artificial Intelligence and the Common Domain Model and Ark51’s Journey to Digitize ISDA Documentation. So my name is Vernon Alden-Smith from ISDA. Just some housekeeping before we get started. So any technical AV questions you may have, any difficulty, please put those via the chat. But any content-related questions and answers, please put into the Q&A tab that's at the bottom of your window there. And there will be time at the end for us to go through some of those questions and give answers. So remember to put those in the Q&A. Also to mention that this webinar will be recorded and distributed in due course to all those who have registered, along with the PDF material and content that we are presenting. So I'm delighted to be here with a CDM collateral visionary who has been working on industry efficiency ideas and putting them into action, along with contributions and work from other industry experts through our working groups. Just to introduce myself officially, my name is Vernon Alden-Smith, Director at ISDA for Collateral Initiatives, and I oversee the collateral CDM working groups, model contributions, and use case implementations, and also introducing Paul Hands, who is Chief Technology Officer of Ark51’s, who has been active in the CDM working groups, model contributions, and CDM collateral use case implementations. So firstly, I wanted to take us through what CDM data structures for collateral use cases that have been built over several years and how it's come from a great idea to reality. So if I move to the first slide. So really just wanted to focus on the challenges in collateral management today. So presently we have many different collateral areas, both internally and externally, that need to exchange information from collateral documentation, eligibility schedules, and other information, collateral-related data between each other. And there's currently lack of industry standards, so every participant is left to implement their own version of how they look at this data and house this data. So really, there's a loss of interoperability between the different solutions. And you probably all agree collateral management sits internally amongst many other teams, such as legal, front office, risk, technology, product. But externally, there are many other participants in the collateral ecosystem, such as other counterparties, custodians, vendors, negotiation platforms, administrators, and data providers. And they all need to get to this data on a daily basis quite quickly to exchange information for normal BAU operations. And obviously, having inefficiency in this area leads us to issues in the collateral journey from start to finish, causing reconciliation issues and inefficiency. And I think this has been amplified by the onset of many regulatory rules. Now we're posting a lot more margins, such as initial margin through UMR, and also across other products such as repo and sec lending, where we need to optimize collateral. So it affects many different elements of the process. So how can the CDM help? So I think in the CDM, we can standardize common terms within CSA agreements, for example, and other collateral agreements, where we can give common outcomes for all the different clauses that you're familiar with within those that need to be collected and used in systems. Now, from a very top level, we can, in the CDM, use a CDM to standardize standard party information for both party A and party B, or party 1, party 2. Standardized agreement dates, effective dates, and how we identify different types of agreement by name, governing law, publisher, and vintage, for et cetera. So the CDM can give us common structured data for all these different things. And then we get into the agreement structures themselves, such as credit support agreement elections, CTA agreement elections, master agreement elections, and so on. And all of these can be structured in a standard way. And all the different clauses that you're familiar with within these documents that do something operationally, and all the outcomes and different variations of those can be standardized as standard code in the CDM to give us a standard common framework. And how this can be used, we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but there's many use cases, and one of them being we can extract information from already negotiated contracts or newly negotiated contracts and put them into standard version data that can be consumed and read more easily by systems. Coverage-wise, we've been working over several years in building out the CDM model in this area, and we have many versions of the CSA. We started to model these in 2019, 2020 with IM agreements, and there's many versions published from 2016 to 2018 across many different jurisdictions, and some of them jointly published with custodians such as European and Clearstream. So all the documents you can see on the left-hand side have been digitized on the CDM, and you probably appreciate that a lot of the structures within these CSAs are common between all of them, but some are unique dependent on the document type. We then moved forward in developing variation margin agreements, so the new generation 2016 CSAs across different jurisdictions. And we've just completed a project for the legacy CSA, so the 94, 95 publications that have more bespoke structures and outcomes within their document, in the document structure. Have also been developed in the CDM. And we've recently been also extending the model to handle umbrella agreements and amendments to these types of agreements. So all the common publications, as we see on this slide here, have been developed in the CDM, and also some of the clauses of the master agreement as well. And obviously the CDM being an open source project, also being contributed by other markets such as securities lending and repo markets. So ISDA and ICMA trade associations also started to include parts of their clause library and taxonomies for their document sets as well. So this slide kind of shows you some examples of what the standardized data output looks like, and these are CDM JSON output files of the structured details of some of the terms of the agreements. Obviously, depending on the agreement type and the length of the agreement, these JSON extract data files can be quite long, but just to give you some examples here, you probably can pick out some common information such as party information, the agreement types and names, and also on the far side there you've got some common election structures such as resolution time, sim elections and things like that. So the CDM model has coverage of all the outcomes of all the clauses, so this just gives you an example of what some of the data looks like in a standard format. So moving on, obviously part of the CSA document is the eligible collateral schedule, and this particular use case can be used beyond the CSA in execution of other products as well, where we commonly reference eligible collateral terms. Now, if you're familiar with eligible collateral schedules, these can be quite challenging to understand and translate, because I think we're living in a situation where everyone is representing the same information but in their own terminology and words. So, for example, UK gilt or US Treasury can be defined in many different ways within eligible collateral schedules and in many different forms of data. But if the industry move forward in using a standard set of information to describe common terms of how we describe collateral and terms of collateral such as concentration limits, haircuts, etc., this data will be a lot more transferable and interoperable in these end-to-end processes. So this slide just gives you some examples. I mean, the CSA document itself has a free format table that encourages terms to be put in their own ways, which creates a problem. And we also have other formats from tri-parties, etc., different formats from different sides of the industry to look at and understand. And obviously this area has become more complex with the onset of regulatory rules, having to understand different sets of jurisdictional rules for different types of concentration limits, for example, haircuts. So more to understand, and obviously data standards can help in this area. So again, over several years through the working group structure of CDM, we developed a model that can handle all the different attributes needed to describe collateral assets for eligibility terms. So things like what's the asset type, how's that broken down, if it's a security, is it a debt and equity, a fund, a warrant certificate, and so on. What's the issuer criteria? Is it sovereign central bank? What's its country of origin? Is it a corporate bond? Is it a regional government, for example? But also alongside that, and that structure does go quite deep in the CDM to cover all types of collateral that are commonly seen. We need to define a standard means for defining maturity ranges, agency ratings, valuation treatments such as haircuts, and also different forms of concentration limits, wrong way risks, etc. But also, we understand that other forms of identifying collateral, such as common product identifiers, such as ISDA, QSIPs, and other taxonomies, also exist. So these can be defined in the CDM alongside the descriptive nature of the collateral. And this is just an extract from the CDM graphical navigator that shows you all the different elements of the collateral criteria, and all of these have different levels of arrays beneath them. And just to call out some of them, there's an area, an attribute data type called asset type that has further attributes beneath it, and also other ones such as issuer name, issuer country of origin, and all the other elements that were on the previous slide as structured in the CDM. So this area of the model has quite a lot of depth to capture all the areas of eligible collateral criteria that we need, and seen across many different versions of schedules that have been provided by members. And again, similar to the slide we covered for CSA, this is just some examples of structured eligible collateral information as CDM JSON output. And you can probably see a few things there that you're familiar with, such as sovereign central bank issued collateral, security debt, and this is all standardized as CDM code to define things like your issuer country of origin and haircuts, etc., and agency ratings. And we've been recently going through a project through the working groups where we gathered several examples from different sides of the industry, including in repo and sec lending, to develop eligible collateral schedule examples to be available and published through CDM for people to extract and use for mapping and validation. And these will be made available this month and into 2026. And just to finish off this introduction, the different types of use cases and benefits of standard document data and eligible collateral, there are several that we're seeing across the industry that's obviously promoting interoperability. So one of them is hard copy or unstructured data. So the use of AI to extract information from documents, and this is what Paul Hans is going to be demonstrating and talking us through today at Ark51. But there's also, triparties and custody looking to embed this logic in their services to allow people to exchange common information for eligible collateral schedule data. We're seeing vendor solutions implement mapping logic to allow them to exchange CSA data and eligible collateral terms to and from their counterparties. We're also seeing development in smart contracts to allow key information from legal documents and eligible collateral terms for the development of smart contracts for use on DLT for tokenized collateral and digital assets. So we are seeing a lot of activity and interest in that area too. And I think overall, the implementation of standard data across these use cases allows institutions to exchange more common standard information to speed up and make processes more accurate and iron out inefficiencies. So that concludes the first introduction from myself. But now I was going to hand over to Paul Hans, who's going to introduce himself in a bit more detail on what he does at Ark51, and then take us through what they've done with implementing CDM at Ark51 DRS. Paul?
Thanks, Vernon. Hi, everybody. So full disclosure before I begin, ISDA did ask me for a full slide's worth of bio about myself. I'm not that narcissistic to say that I should talk about myself for a full slide. My name is Paul. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Ark51. I've been dealing with intelligence in some way, shape, or form for about 15 years now. We have I started with a PhD at Newcastle University looking at neuroscience, neural pathways, vectors, various other bits and pieces that included programming. Finished my PhD. At that point, decided to get out of academia. There was nowhere near enough job stability or revenue for it, so went into the private sector and did software consultancy for a few finance firms, dealing with regulatory impacts such as MiFID II and other bits and pieces, before moving to Ark51, where we started building Ark51. And Ark51 only really began to properly evolve into the product that it is today about 3 years ago, when with the advent of ChatGPT and GPT 3.5, there was a boom of large language models that were reduced, which seemed to change the game in terms of how AI can be used to optimize and facilitate faster workflows in terms of the boring and the mundane tasks that we have to do on a day-to-day basis. Vernon, if you can go to the next slide for me, please. So this isn't just going to be me waxing lyrical about the application that we've got. I think this would tell me off if I spent much more time than I'm going to about talking about Ark51 as it stands. But effectively what it boils down to is a document digitization platform. Companies everywhere understand that there is an enormous amount of data that's held inside the legal contracts that they have, and that these contracts, when they get into big enough numbers, they actually react to external influences like market events, and they almost come into a life of their own. Reacting to these quickly and being able to be first in line for a termination event or to send your notices at the right time into the right place is of paramount importance. And everyone understands that. Everyone wants to have the data available for their new digital systems. Nobody really wants to deal with the hard labor of lifting and shifting the data from PDFs and Word documents into a digital platform. And that's where Ark51 has utilized AI to really speed up that process and do it. Once you've got the data, obviously you need to be able to do more than just look at it. So we have got analytics and reporting as well. One of the new things we've introduced, which is still factoring in AI, is chatbots. You can now ask one of the Ark51 chatbots to, for example, say, how many of my CSAs accept eligible collateral from French government bonds? And if then the AI will go away, churn away and say, okay, out of all of your contracts, these 15 will accept French government bonds. And here's the ratings triggers, and here's all of the different margin percentages that you need to be aware of. We do have an opinions module as well, which I'm not going to touch on, but I think that that's going to be important for CDM in the future. And I think it's going to be important for dealing with kind of digital standardization as well as we move forward, combining that with the document information to create real-time indications of closeout netting enforceability. We lumped into CDM about 2 years ago. It was just over 2 years ago we started looking at it and putting it into production. It does take quite a while to do. But the mantra behind it was one that we were fully behind, which is that you can't really in this day and age expect to be brilliant from the absolute beginning to the absolute end of any kind of workflow process. Being a jack of all trades and a master of none is kind of the mantra that we've facilitated and believed in terms of, and CDM helps to be able to be very good at your piece of the puzzle and then be able to integrate further downstream with a different system that's good at its piece of the puzzle. And that's kind of the mantra that we've used with CDM so far. We will take the chaos of the documents, we'll digitize it, but then once we've done that, you can see what the data says. But if you want to put out a collateral management system, we don't do collateral management. There's no point in us trying to spread ourselves too thin. I didn't want this to just be a demonstration. I did want it to have a little bit of a kind of a knowledge share piece of it as well. So I do apologize if the audience is going, if I'm sort of pitching it to the wrong audience here, but I don't believe I am. If you can go to the next slide, Bern, for me, please. Just to talk a bit more about artificial intelligence in general. And when these large language models were released and when they sort of exploded onto the scene, they actually changed the way that software and programming works under the hood if it's used. Previously, everything was very deterministic. So by that, if you take an input, you put it through a process, be that a decision tree, an if-else set of statements, or even something that starts as a calculator. You put 2 plus 2 into a calculator, that process adds it up, the output is always 4. If you apply that same input, you put 2 plus 2 in again, you will still get 4 over and over and over again, and it's an infinite kind of position. So there's 100% certainty your process is going to spit out 4 at the end when you put that input in. AI actually flipped that on its head a little bit. Sorry, Vern, not quite ready yet. AI flipped that on its head a little bit and changed the process to probabilistic. And effectively in that position, now when you put the same input in, the output is not necessarily going to be the same. And it's worked out via a lot of interesting data models. There's a lot of probability matrices that go behind the scenes to work it out. But the AI models, the large language models, are effectively saying, what's the most sensible thing to say here based on probability models and statistics? And while it will get closer and while it will do quite well with the output, if it's a very structured question that's put in, there is still no way to guarantee a 100% certainty that the answer is going to be what you expect it to be dealing with AI. Now, this isn't all bad and it's not all good in the same way. So there are good pros and cons to this. If you can go to the next slide for me, Vernon, please. So the probabilistic approach has got positive and negative effects to it. So the positives are a lot to do with flexibility and speed. And that actually, in turn, generates a bit of a sense of ingenuity when it comes to how these AIs can work. If we take an easy example, such as trying to extract the base currency from a CSA, we might read a CSA and it says the base currency is euro. We can program something in to say, okay, programmatically, if I see the base currency is, the next bit of text that I'm looking at, that's what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for that because that will be the thing that I'm wanting to find the information for. You put the second CSA in, it says the base currency is GBP. Brilliant, that works. That's no problem. We found that the base currency is, and then we take GBP and there's our data extraction. The problem that you've got is that when you put something in that says USD will be the base currency, suddenly you don't have the base currency is, you have something that's different. And deterministic work, previously in programming, you would have to go and say, right, we need to factor that in. We need to add another strand to our decision tree to say, X will be the base currency is a valid position. So look for the thing that said before will be the base currency. And you can imagine that if you look at something like an eligible collateral schedule, those could be enormous and they could have a lot of problems to get wrangled and to get solved. AI breaks that a little bit, and it breaks it in a good way in that because of the fact that it uses probability, it reads and acts and appears to be working a little bit more like a human would in terms of the comprehension, being able to say, oh, okay, you're asking me what the base currency is. Those two sentences are both alluding to it, and they have both got the subject, whether it's at the beginning or at the end. In that case, USD, in the first case, euro. So the good side of it is this flexibility and speed that it gives you. It lets you go a lot faster. The uncertainty is a big down draw. So the fact that now we've broken this deterministic effect, we can't say for certain the output will always be what we expect it to be, and we can't give it the same input and get the same output for testing, which means that it's a lot harder for downstream integration. It's a lot harder to try and deal with something like a CDM model when you are dealing with an AI-generated piece of information, because intrinsically it might have got something slightly wrong based on its own probability matrices. And a big underlying problem that also exists here is that there's a concept of locked out, and this is to do with AI in general. A lot of these models are proprietary. A lot of them are hidden and are kept away. They are protected, and the data sets that are used to train the models are very strongly protected by the companies that own them. GPT, the most recent iteration, I think was trained onto about 25 to 30% of the available internet. So it's an enormous data set that they're using. I wouldn't advocate for building your own AI from scratch because it's going to take an awful lot more time and money than a current subscription to any of the big ones would be in Azure or in Google. But because you're using someone else's model, it's impossible to evaluate just how the AI came to the solution that it did. That doesn't mean it's all bad. And there are new techniques available, and there's one that we've used. That's why I'm gearing up to this. If you can go to the next slide for me, Vernon, please. Few shot modeling is a relatively new concept, or it was relatively new last year. This pace of AI, things change very quickly, which effectively allows you to enhance the good and alleviate the bad of artificial intelligence. So before you send the actual input you're looking for, so if you imagine that base currency example, before you send US dollar will be the base currency, you can instruct the AI in what it expects with a few examples. So in this scenario here, and let's go to an eligible collateral schedule, I can provide my AI process with an eligible collateral schedule from a PDF and what the expected outcome should look like. That's the first blue. Then I can provide it a second example, which is the orange, and a third example, which is the khaki. Each one of those I can say, and this is what it should look like when you do it. Then I pass in the purple input, which is my actual ECS table I'm trying to extract. And the AI has changed its probability matrix. It's had a bit of influence to go, this should be more likely to be responded to, and allows us to massage and manipulate the output slightly into what we expect to be more correct and more towards the style and the format that we would like it to be, providing examples beforehand. If you can go to the next slide for me, Vernon. So then this all comes around to how it ties to eligible collateral schedules, which is what we're talking about today. As Vernon alluded to earlier, there's a huge variety in how ECS tables are structured. They can be formatted in sort of basic prose. They can have tables. They can have tables that work with prose underneath them. There is no sort of one-size-fits-all solution for an ECS kind of table that's existing in documentation. And they've been around for however many years already. We aren't going to redraw them and redraft them at this point in time. There is a high amount of complexity in ECS tables. They tie a lot of data together and they tie together in different ways. And once you have tied all of the stuff together, you are very bothered about what that data inherently will say. And they're big. They can be enormous. They can have a lot of different bits and pieces to them that need to be pulled apart. And if you've got a lot of them, it can be a real pain to extract and digitize that information within either manually or using just sort of a native AI approach. We know that eligible collateral schedules can be represented very well in CDM. We've spent a lot of time building the CDM representation of ECS tables and eligible collateral to allow us to standardize this in a digital format. But we do have a bit of chaos beforehand in that we can't just sort of say to someone who's a non-techie, go and put this into CDM for me, because it's a hard process to get into to actually get from paper to CDM. And this is a clear example of where few-shot learning not only could work, but that we've actually used few-shot learning to make sure that it does work. And that is what I'm going to show today. So Vernon, if it's all right with you, I will pinch the screen. Right, I believe I am sharing my screen now. If you can't see it, then please do pipe up in the chat and let me know, but I'm pretty sure I am. So we've got this is Ark51. There's a whole plethora of things that I can show, but I'm not going to go into all of them today because I don't have time. If you want to know more, please do reach out. I'm more than happy to have a conversation. The bits that I'm interested in today, or the bits that we're interested in today, is the concept of using AI to get ECS tables out, and then the concept of how quickly we can then get from there to a CDM representation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in a CSA. So I'm dragging in a CSA. All I'm doing, it's called CSA Megabank Exported. All of the stuff that you're seeing today from me is completely made up. Some of the entities that we're using do have LEIs, but they aren't live contracts. So it is completely dummy data. So no one's confidentiality is at risk. I'm going to upload this document and I'm going to say complete the details with AI. There's a little spinner at the top that says it's going away and working. All I've done is given the document to the system. I haven't told it any information. It's got a title that might help, but it's not really doing anything to the title. It's just looking at it. And it's already finished doing what it's doing for its initial first pass. So its initial first pass is to basically upload the document and have a look to see what do we think we're looking at. So when I look, it's identified it as a 1995 English Law CSA between Megabank Japan and Honest Bank PLC. And I can go and take a quick look. I can scroll down, I can verify, but yeah, okay, Megabank Japan and Honest Bank PLC are indeed the two parties. It doesn't have a date of execution or a dated as of date because it's a dummy document. I didn't put one in. And we can tell it where we want it to answer it. Firstly, it's CSA specific questions. And more importantly now, where does our eligible collateral schedule start and where does it end? So I'm having a look and I'm saying, I know this, because I've obviously tried it a couple of times. Our ECS table is here. It's not a particularly outrageously complicated one, but it's also more difficult than, it's fairly standard in terms of the way that it would be written. So it's cash and eligible currencies between party A and party B, valuation percentages with maturities that we need to be worried about. I can hit complete and it goes away and it's doing its second pass through the AI. So this is where we are using our few shot learning and our examples that we preceded into the application to have a go at pulling out the eligible collateral information, as well as some specific CSA based information as well. It's already finished. It does work exceptionally quick when it's looking at a relatively small document. I'm going to take a look and I'm pulling out, this is the information. You've probably seen this before in terms of if you've ever seen Ark51 being demoed before. I know I've shown this in sort of a CDM webinar similar, I think it was about last year. So I'm not particularly going to pause on this for too long, but it's pulled out the information that we care about based on the CSA. If I have a quick look for, say, the delivery amount rounding, I'm allowed to quickly check and say, yeah, okay, delivery amount will be rounded upwards. So it's correctly pulling out the bits of information that we care about. And then in terms of the exciting bit, the new bit, is this eligible collateral support. So you can see the ECS table. It's taken us to see it. It's taken which cash are eligible. It's worked out that the base currency, euro and GBP, were our eligible currencies. And if I go all the way along, it's given us valuation percentages of 100%, which it's supposed to. When I look to see at the securities, we split up. It has split up based on the pre-shot learning that we've given it, the few shot learning we gave it, but it's negotiable debt obligations by the US Treasury Department, which sits right there, the government of the United Kingdom, the government of the French Republic. These all actually have maturities on them. They have less than 1 year's 99, 1 year to 597, and 5 years to 1095. And it's captured that in our calculator pads and our valuations as well. So it's capturing all of the information that we want quickly, efficiently, and accurately. And the few shot learning is the thing that's made the difference from us trying to get it to give us the information to giving us something that we can put straight into the system. So I'm going to hit confirm and save. As a little bit of a, I'm trying to think of the right word, as the CDMs are constantly evolving, and one of the bits of the evolution that's coming up soon is to separate out the different strands of the CSA elections to allow us to capture information for a VM, for an IM, and for a legacy. At the moment, they're all kind of piled in together. Because of that, I'm going to show you effectively one that I did earlier to make sure that we're happy with all of the information is present. So if I open up this one here, again, all dummy data still, and I can take a look at our eligible collateral table here. You can see it's very much of a muchness in terms of the information that I'm collecting and the information that we've got. These ones do have some maturities and some rating triggers. What the system allows you to do is very quickly click export to CDM, and it generates a CDM representation of that contract instantaneously. So that was a live translation from Ark51 data straight to CDM. And you can see it's captured the LEIs and the BIC codes of, for example, Banco Bradesco and the Coca-Cola Euro-Pacific partners. Again, can't reiterate this too many times, fake contracts. And while they are real entities, this is not a real contract between them. The bit that's important and the bit that's like kind of the special exciting bit that we think is that we've now got this eligible collateral section of the posting obligations working and drawing through immediately, taking the haircut percentages, taking in the margins, taking in all of the different bits and pieces that we care about to make sure that everything works quickly and efficiently. And now this is ready to be downloaded and integrated into any different downstream processes for collateral management or similar. And that was all that I wanted to show. Vernon, I'll pass back to you as taskmaster, but I'm quite happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you, Paul. It's all very exciting stuff and good to see it again. Hope everyone's enjoyed the demo. Just a question to you, Paul, from me, actually. What else does Ark51 have planned for CDM next year? Obviously, I know you've mapped to several CSAs already and eligible collateral schedules. What's the next step for you?
So I think that the next step for us, as far as we can see, is we want to keep up with CDM. We are actively helping to contribute to it. We believe that the CSA elections is quite well bedded in. It's quite mature now. The next bit that I believe that we should be really focusing on is the master agreement elections. So an ISDA master agreement and a GMSLA, a GMRA, those kind of three big contracts, they lend themselves to being represented in the legal space for CDM, and people are bothered about the elections that are contained within. And that's something that we are actively helping to contribute to on the CDM contribution side. Obviously, once we've contributed it to CDM, we would then be making sure that it works correctly with our systems as well. So effectively at this point, Vernon, it would be more keeping up and driving it forward than anything sort of to catch up that we would need to do.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul. I mean, just a reminder to those on the webinar today, if you do have any questions and answers, please put them in the Q&A tab at the bottom there, and we'll review them shortly. Just before we do that, I just wanted to highlight an appendix that is in the pack that was for the webinar. I'll just share that on the screen now. There's a few more slides just to be aware of. Now, this PDF will be sent out with the recording when that goes out in due course, so you'll be able to see all the information shared today. So just here we've got a slide that kind of, if people are unfamiliar with CDM and you're just learning about CDM, this slide is for you. It gives a high-level overview of what the CDM is. So an open source data model, but not just covering collateral contracts and eligible collateral information. It covers a lot of products, derivative products, sec lending and repo products, and events, life cycles on those products as well. And also uses reference data such as fixed FPML ISO 2002. CDM is not a software and application in and of itself, but can be implemented within one. Also, the next slide shows you a bit of history about the CDM and the fact that different trade associations feed into the CDM. But the CDM is owned by FinOS, which is the FinTech Open Source Foundation, who own the CDM and look after the governance structure and all the working group structures related to contributing and adding to the CDM as an open source project. So on the final slide, there's quite a lot of information on here, but it's some links to some useful information on the ISDA website, where we have a startup guide that takes you from the very start of the CDM, introducing the CDM, and then building up into the different use cases and how to access, use the CDM, how it works, etc. That QR code takes you to the page on the website where that exists, and there's also links to other working groups, the FinOps working groups, the ISDA working groups, and so on. And there's links on the far side for the CDM collateral working group and the ISDA CDM legal agreement working group, where a lot of this work takes place. So just to highlight those. So as I say, this will all be sent out to those who registered for the webinar in due course. So I'll leave that slide up there. So just look at the Q&As 1 second. Okay, so the question for you, Paul, is Ark51 already an available system? Are there any financial institutions currently using it? I'm not sure how far you can answer that, but Paul?
Yeah, I mean, so you're right, Vernon. So Ark51 absolutely is live and available, and we have got live clients. I think our longest standing client has been around with us for about 1.5 years now, nearly 2 years. I can't really go into details of who they are or how many we have. But it is certainly live, and we do certainly have clients that are currently using the system. Yes.
Thank you, Paul. There's some other ones here. Bear with me. So can anyone join the working groups? Absolutely. You don't have to be an ISDA member or a member of other trade associations to join a bulk of the CDM working groups, obviously because they're under the FinOS structure. So it's an open source project. So anyone can register for these working groups and join the working groups and provide input to those. So absolutely. Okay, there's another question here, Paul. What is the difference between few-shot learning and a training model, training the model, sorry?
It's a really good question. So few-shot learning is the safest way to ensure that the data that you provide can then be forgotten. So obviously proprietary data, and these machines ingest and chew up data like no tomorrow. Training a model, you effectively do few-shot learning, but you do few-shot learning on a grander scale and effectively leave it up there. Now, there are a lot of things that say that there are a lot of different legalese places in times and terms and conditions to say that you can't put it all into the right, you can't like take our data and use it. But the safest way to make sure that that doesn't happen is to stop the data from being sent to the upstream models. It's also usually quite expensive to train your own model, whereas few-shot learning has a little bit more of that power on a slightly smaller scale, but with the security of data sanctity and the cost benefits as well.
Thanks, Paul. There's a couple more coming through here. We have got time for them. This next question, how are you handling amendments given the variation in language complexity and back referencing to the original? So this is a good question. It's currently something we're working on at the moment through the working groups. Now we have put all of the CSA versions into the CDM model, and the last ones have been the legacy documents. We're now looking at adding in extra code that can handle amendments and detail what those amendments are. And some of the questions through those recent working groups have been about the back referencing of the original data and how the document can be reproduced. So that is something that we're still working through at the moment. And I could possibly share the meeting slides from the recent meetings that give some of that information for the person who asked that question. But yeah, it's something we're looking to implement into the CDM model in Q1. Paul, is there anything you wanted to add to that as well?
No, I think that the CDM side of it you've covered. I think that there is still conversations going on about the best way to do it. You know, our amendments, do you want to see an amendment in its purest form to say I'm changing this small clause inside a document without seeing what the document originally was? But yeah, CDM is definitely moving towards capturing that amendment space. Inside Ark, inside of Ark51, we actually have a slightly separate AI pipeline, which I don't have time to show today, but I'd be more than happy to demo. We effectively upload the amendment against the original, and we have a different AI pipeline that says, what might this be changing? We then show that to the user to say, we think these things are changed, are we correct? And they can say, yeah, those things are correct. You've missed one here though, or that thing's not actually changed in this amendment. And then the AI goes through and does the extraction. It's I don't have time to show it. We have a bit of a timeline view. So we have a bit of a kind of, this is what we have a consolidated view all the way through to say, this is what the document looked like when you first signed it. Then amendment 1, 2, 3, 10 came in, and that's what the document looked like at this point in time. And I suppose that leads on to the question from Charles Schneider, which is to say, will Ark51 consolidate CSAs that have been amended multiple times into a golden source, or should that be done manually? We can effectively extract every single piece of it. I think that there's value in having that timeline of what the document looked like at the different points in time. We've tried to make it as easy as possible to get through the step-by-step basis. Effectively, the consolidated view can be done from CDM, so we can put a consolidated view of this is what your CSA looks like right now on each timeline node. But we can, it's more a case of a consolidated view is done once the amendments have been uploaded, but that is done via AI.
Thanks, Paul. There's just one last question here, and then we'll close the webinar. So basically, is there currently any new CDM collateral use cases in discussion? Yes, we are thinking about next year, since we've now built a lot of structures already, such as CSAs, eligible collateral, and other areas. We're starting to now think about how CDM can help with functions on collateral workflows. There could be many, such as substitutions, optimization, and other areas such as digital assets and tokenized collateral. So there's many different areas there the CDM could help in further development in workflows, and some of this is already happening in the product side of the model. So we'll be looking at some of those next year. So if you're interested to participate in any of those discussions, we will be bringing those to the working groups next year. Thank you. Okay, appreciate everyone dialing in to the webinar. Hope you found it very informative, and thank you, Paul, for presenting and doing the demo today. And I'd like to now close the webinar. Thanks, everybody.